me, who has had a taste of that field, but nowhere close to those who are like way up there, who obviously are a lot more stressed out because of just the amount of data that they have to keep doing, and their whole lives are just dedicated to that stuff, right?
Oh, look who's here. Good old Standing popped in. Hey, Standing.
Hey, Standing.
Hey, brothers, gentlemen, what's going on? What's going on?
What's up? What's going on?
So
Yo! So we're just talking.
Oh, yeah. No, I know. I caught the last 5 minutes of it. I was kind of curious. I wanted to just ask you a question, Rob, and I do have the.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, what was the intent behind the comment?
I just want to just real quick, because you were kind of talking a lot there, and I'm not coming in here to be combative, and I do have faith that you'll know the answer to this question. I just find that you're kind of. You do like to throw jabs at the YEC PhDs, okay? So let me ask you a question. Do you know who recently spoke in the last year or two at the NIH, National Institute for Health? Do you recall the name of the PhD?
No, I haven't followed
degeneration?
That.
No. That's kind of telling. I'm going to actually screen share for Smokey. So sure. This is actually a young Earth creationist geneticist by the name of Dr. John Sanford. So he spoke. Are you familiar, Rob, with the NIH?
I'm familiar with his name,
yeah. So he was invited to speak at the NIH. He's a young Earth creationist PhD. He's actually he's done the most study and research into human genetic degeneration and the accumulation of diseases in the human population and human genome. So he spoke on human genetic degeneration and mutation accumulation at NIH. Now, obviously, the NIH is not a young Earth creationist organization, as you know. And even they acknowledge that the problem of mutation accumulation and accumulating diseases, every single year, thousands of new mutation-related diseases being added into the genetic database. And we have young Earth creationist PhDs such as Dr. John Sanford here, Dr. Rob Carter. He's actually a marine biologist as well. He's published on mitochondrial DNA in the secular journals. Are you familiar with Dr. Rob Carter's paper on mitochondrial DNA diversity in the secular journals, Rob?
No.
Okay, so and that's fine. That's fine.
Because this is not my field.
Well, here's the thing, though. You're constantly throwing.
And I'm familiar, but I am familiar with.
Here's my question. Here's my
question.
No.
1 second. I'll just quickly say this. I am familiar with the mitochondrial calculations purely because of people like Fazal Rana, who has written. He wrote a 2004 book with Hugh Ross on Who Was Adam. And then he proposed that you have a bottlenecking with respect to Noah and his family. And then he gave a 10-year update, a 2015 update onto the same book where he reviewed that proposition. And that's the extent to which I know anything about the mitochondrial and the Y chromosome
and that's
data
fine.
points.
I just don't want to deter from my point.
But I just want to quickly say that they then rejected that.
My point, would you agree that human genetic degeneration and the accumulation of nearly neutral mutations is a real concern to the health of humans?
Sure.
I've got a number of slides here from the NIH lecture by Dr. John Sanford. I highly recommend you look at it. So here's the problem. Is that we have people like Dr. John Sanford, who is a YEC, that's actually looking into this and taking it very seriously. And now a lot of secular scientists who do hold to, obviously, the evolutionary worldview, they're now treating it very seriously as well. That's why they invited him to speak on it. So my question to you, if young Earth creation and the model of separate ancestry is so pseudoscientific and PhD scientists who are young Earth creationists are not taken seriously, how would you then explain if people like Kondrashov, Crow, Michael Lynch, Higgins, Dr. John Sanford, if they don't see a solution to the mutation accumulation problem, which actually puts shelf lives on genomes, including the human genome, how do you explain that from your evolutionary model, Rob?
How do evolutionists try and explain it?
Well, here's how they try and explain it. Beneficial mutations, selection interference. They'll look to certain artificially contrived mechanisms such as mutation count mechanisms, synergistic epistasis, truncation selection. I'm not sure if you're familiar with any of these, but here's the problem is they've actually all been looked at in numerical simulations. They've all been falsified. They don't have an answer yet to this mutation accumulation problem. So here's the thing. If humans are degenerating, but you want to say that humans go back millions of years, if you want to consider the Australopithecines up to Homo habilis, up to Homo erectus, who, lived.
But I'm also concerned with how would, say, Joshua Swamidass respond to this sort of thing, because this is technically most of his field.
In what I just said, truncation selections. Are you familiar with synergistic epistasis, Rob?
No. Again, I'm affirming
I'll say, and then
that I'm not. This is it's kind of ironic. And again, quite childish of you to bring this up, because
no, it's not childish.
I specifically told everyone live
jabs at young Earth creationists.
No, but the young Earth creationist model,
and yet the young Earth creationist by the name.
Standing.
You're excited, Rob. I'm gonna finish my thought here, and then I'll let you take as much time as you want. Okay. Dr. John Sanford is a PhD young Earth creationist. He spoke at NIH. I'm not sure.
And he doesn't speak on behalf of astrophysics or any of the other fields that contradict
we're
the young
talking about. Listen, when you say PhD young Earth creationists aren't contributing to science or working in anything that would help with the improvement of, say, humans, this is the fact that we have disease. For example, here we have secular scientists agreeing. Michael Lynch, world famous population geneticist, at least 30% of individuals with autism spectrum disorders, going into the fact that de novo mutations are resulting in what? The increase in immune system disorders, diabetes, male infertility, asthma. And you want to say that mutations are going to drive pond scum to people?
So
mutations are going to drive a fish to fisherman. And
so all of these people literally believe that 6,000 years ago, a pear was de novo created.
Here's the thing, Rob. If you're holding to the evolutionary worldview, then you're going to be like Michael Lynch. You're going to be like
do these people believe that?
Rob, you're missing the point. No, they hold to the evolutionary model. That's why they're saying, well, we need an explanation. I mean, here's Kondrashov's question.
No, these younger creationist PhD holders, do they believe that? That Adam and Eve was de novo created 6,000 years ago?
Of course, because mutation accumulation puts shelf lives on the human genome, on all species, which takes us back to roughly 6,000 years. Rob,
notice that again, this is what baffles me. So where in the genetic data can you actually calculate it to be exactly 6,000 years when the Bible doesn't even give that figure? It doesn't give the age of everything, the universe, to be 6,000 years. And that Adam and Eve were the first people, the only two to first, to be around, and then that every human being comes from just Adam and Eve. Where's the biblical data for that?
So right here we have. This is referring to the Parsons paper. Are you familiar with the Parsons paper, Rob, where they realized that the mitochondrial DNA compartment?
Yeah, I've seen this one, the 1908 one. Yeah.
Right. So they concluded that when we actually look at the faster mutation rate in the mitochondrial DNA.
And apparently this paper, there's a response to it.
Well, real quick. I just want to finish my thought, and then I'll give you as much time as you want. So what they realize is that when you consider the faster mutation rate in the mitochondrial DNA, they pointed out that mitochondrial Eve would have lived just 6,000 years ago. But of course, according to the secularists, that can't be the fact. So what they do is they calibrate the data, and when they calibrate the data, they actually come up with a much slower mutation rate. But what we can do is look to the 1,000 Genomes program. We can build a mitochondrial phylogeny, and guess what? there is an average of 20 to 25 mitochondrial DNA differences separating any two people. What that means is there's incredibly low genetic variation in mitochondrial DNA. So, Rob, we have an incredibly fast mutation rate in the mitochondrial DNA with very few DNA differences separating any two people. How do you explain that in your deep time evolutionary model? Go ahead.
Yeah, so have you brought this up with people like Swamidass?
I've had 80 to 100 debates, and I've debated PhDs on this. Dr. Dan Stern-Cardinal, Dr. Stefan Frello, Dr. Ron Garrett. I mean, I'm up to date on this, but clearly you're not. So how do you answer this? Rob, use critical thinking skills. We have a fast mutation rate in the mitochondrial DNA compartment. This is a phylogenetic tree. We have very few mutations here, average 20 to 25 mutations separating any two people. How do you explain this? This is only a few hundred generations worth of mutations. Explain it in your evolutionary model. Go ahead.
Yeah, I honestly don't believe any of these data points, because unless this is actually in peer review.
The 1,000 Genomes Project. This is why I say you're out of date. You're out of touch with reality. I challenge you right now, Rob, to a formal debate on this. Universal ancestry or separate ancestry. You have no answer. I've shown you papers and quotes from what? Population geneticists who are not young Earth creationists, okay, that Dr. John Sanford was referring and referencing at the NIH lecture. Dr. Joshua Swamidass, he never gave a presentation or a lecture at NIH. You've never given a presentation.
The reason why I don't, the reason why, standing, you keep saying that you'll allow me to speak.
You're not answering any of the questions. I ask a question, and then you have as much time as you want to answer the question. Then you just say, well, like, what's Swamidass say about this? Listen, you're the one who's always scoffing at young Earth creationists.
Yeah, I am.
I want you to use critical thinking skills.
Because isn't it interesting? You're bringing up a field. You're bringing up a field that I'm not proficient in, and I'm definitely proficient in. For example, why do I keep bringing up Jason Lyle's work? Why do I keep bringing up his PhD?
Now you want to dodge. I'm
not dodging. I'm not dodging. I'm just saying. I've just admitted
that there's no young Earth creationists who are actually doing any work that's beneficial to society.
Absolutely no work.
You that yes, there is. We have PhDs. We have PhD geneticists. Show like Dr. John Sanford. I've already shown you. Smokey, make him answer the question. Well, why are there so few mutations here? Plus, we have a fast mutation rate. But you want to say that humans go back 200,000 years ago, and then those humans go back millions of years to the Australopithecines up to.
Show me in the Bible where you can go back 6,000 years.
Well, can I ask or clarify? Maybe just let's take a quick breather for that. But Stanley, maybe I could ask you a couple questions on this if you don't mind.
Sure.
Well, I don't mind just responding back quickly.
Oh no, go ahead, Rob. I just go ahead. I was curious on a couple things. Go ahead.
So the reason why I don't really trust any of this cherry picking, this is nothing but the Dunning-Kruger effect that I'm seeing over here.
Okay, wait a minute. So you're going to slap and run? No, I don't let people slap and run. Are you familiar with the 1,000 Genomes Project? It's not a young Earth creationist project. Are you familiar with the ENCODE project? You didn't even know that Dr. John Sanford spoke at the NIH, but yet you want to come in here and talk like some big authority on old Earth creation versus young Earth creation, but you don't even understand the basics. Can you reiterate to me one testable prediction coming out from Dr. Nathaniel Jensen? Let's see. I mean, you uploaded his debate with Vanima. Go ahead. Take as much time as you need. Give me, you know what? I've got faith in you. Give me 3 predictions right now that Dr. Nathaniel Jensen, a Harvard graduate, has made. Go ahead.
I honestly don't recall. And that doesn't nullify or
seriously. This is why you're not taken seriously, because this has been 20 minutes of
standing
decimation.
The behavior that you're presenting here is very childish.
No, it's not childish.
Honestly,
it's not childish because you like to slap and run. You like to throw jabs at young Earth creationist PhDs.
I'll still keep doing that.
Demolish you. Answer this.
Not really.
Oh yeah. Explain why the Y chromosome family tree. Are you familiar with Simon
Standing?
Diversity
Standing. Hang on a second. Standing. Since you have so much proficiency in genetic studies, you haven't
answered one question yet.
Are you actually a professional in this field?
I'm just coming in here
Standing?
to show the entire audience.
Standing. Are you a professional in this field?
Excuse me?
Are you a professional in this field?
Look how funny this is. Dodge, duck, dip,
have you actually have you taken a degree in this? Do you have any paperwork?
Yes, I've got more of a science background than you. I've got more of a
So
science
why
background than you,
haven't you
okay?
gone
I
into
was registered as
university
a
and
nurse for
attained a
years and
degree in
years and
this?
years. I've done intense study. Once again, I'm not going to let you slap and run. Explain
What do you
why
mean you've done intense study?
I've
All you're
done
doing is
intense
cherry
study.
picking data by
Rob, I
people
know you're
who claim
excited,
to
but
have
you're dodging all over the
credentials.
place. I'm going to mute myself, and I want you to at least try. Use critical thinking skills. The little amount of critical thinking skills you have. This is not okay. This is from the 1,000 Genomes program. Anybody can do it. Okay. You're trying to say, oh, this is Dunning-Kruger and young Earth creationists made this up. This is just a reflection of DNA differences. Anybody can get this. Okay. There's, like I said, average of 20 to 25 mitochondria. I debated a PhD evolutionary biologist on this. Okay. He didn't have an answer. I don't expect you to have an answer either, but at least do your best. Okay. Explain why this mitochondrial DNA phylogenetic tree reflects only a few hundred generations and not thousands of generations.
So,
like you want
so
everybody
you're
to believe. Go
asking,
ahead.
okay, so my answer is you're asking someone who has basically become quite proficient in a wild field of engineering science and astrophysics
Just say
to
you don't have an
engage
answer. Just say
with
you don't have an answer.
a field of research and a body of data that is of a totally different spectrum,
Wait a minute.
which
You
I never
uploaded a video.
specialized in.
You uploaded a video on mitochondrial DNA trying to say that young Earth creationists don't understand it and we're wrong on mitochondrial DNA. But now you're trying to divert. You also uploaded Dr. Dennis Venema versus Dr. Jensen's 4-hour debate. You claim that
and I haven't actually
Venema has admitted that Jensen won that debate. I want you to reiterate one prediction that Jensen made in that 4.5 hour debate. You
Venema acknowledged that in the context of
that you can't reiterate one prediction from that debate.
Smokey, this is not going to be a fruitful discussion if Stanning's just going to act like a child in this discussion.
You haven't answered one question yet. I've asked 10.
Let's let a little. I do still have a couple questions, but let's let Rob respond at least and get a.
Well, okay.
So Standing,
I gotta go upstairs and get a drink of water anyway. So take your time. I'm muting. I gotta go get some water.
Oh, okay. You'll still be listening, right? Standing. I'm sure he will. Yeah, he's probably in earshot. Go ahead, Rob.
So notice this very childish behavior and praise. I'm glad you're witness to this. This is the sort of thing that I see with young Earth creationists. In fact, Joel Duff, when you and Raw Matt were reviewing the Joel Duff lecture that he gave, this is precisely the sort of like the projection that's presented, and it's quite embarrassing, to be honest. Any working scientist who sort of sees what Standing just did would kind of just be like, all right, then that's you on the internet, boy. I can go back into the lab.
So you had 2 minutes there, and you didn't answer one question. You cried like a baby. Wah, wah, wah.
I'm not crying like a baby. Honestly, this is really.
I want you to deal with the data.
This is really telling.
Deal with the data. Deal with the data, Rob.
So, Smokey, my question to you, in fact, even to praise, I specifically said that this is not my field. Did I say that?
Do you want me to pull up your comment on Bread of Life's channel where you said that no young Earth creation PhDs are doing any work that is beneficial to society? I showed you Dr. John Sanford, how he spoke at the NIH, which you're familiar with because you're out of date, and he has a biblical-based mindset. Okay.
So then, Standing, here's where it gets interesting. So you can come up with a field. For example, if you came up with something in the context of, say, geophysics. I mean, I have a little bit more working knowledge of geophysics than biology and genetics, but I would still fall back on the expertise of professionals in that field to basically get their data points and get their reaction to whatever claims that can be made.
Yeah, but
I want their feedback.
I've already given you what.
If I now specifically in the field that I'm in, I know this for a fact. Specifically in the field that I'm proficient in. This is why I don't trust the cherry picking of the data points that you're presenting in the field that I'm not proficient in. So in the field that I'm proficient in, when I look at, young Earth creationists like Danny Faulkner, by the way, and I've been looking at the Answers Research Journal specifically with
are you
Faulkner's.
just admitting that you have no answers to any of the questions?
No, I'm giving you my response.
Yeah, but this isn't a
I want
response to
everyone.
any
I
of
want
the
you
direct
to
points that
take
I
it for
brought
what
up.
it is, and I want others to also judge by my response.
Okay,
so
you
here's
give
my
your
response.
Then I'll give my
So
final
allow
response
me to respond back.
Okay, take your time, but
So
then I get a response after equal time. Go ahead.
Okay, go for it. You can respond back after. So I've been looking at the Answers Journal, and I find it curious that, for example, Danny Faulkner, and in fact, I've told this to Smokey before, I actually like Danny Faulkner because he's been releasing a lot of papers in the astrophysical context.
Did you want me sharing your screen standing, or were you done?
No, that's fine. You can share.
Okay.
You can share. No, you can share.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
go ahead. But I'm not going to say anything. Go ahead, Rob.
All
Take
right.
your time.
So Danny Faulkner has been releasing a lot of papers saying these are arguments young Earth creationists should not be using. And easily 90% of all the arguments that young Earth creationists have been making throughout the 80s, 90s, and even early 2000s, specifically even the ones that Ken Hovind's been making, Danny Faulkner has been refuting. And Danny Faulkner himself admits that there's still problems with the starlight. Like, for example, he reviewed Jason Lyle's 2010 paper on his so-called solution to the starlight problem. And so I find it curious that Danny, like, I'm giving you an example in the field that I read.
Yeah, but you haven't
I
answered
regularly
any of the questions
research
I
in.
provided. Listen, monologue, Rob. How much longer do I have to dodge the questions
I'm demonstrating
that I
to you
asked you?
here
If you want to
that
have a
when
debate on
I
distant starlight,
engage
sure,
with the
let's go
field
ahead.
that I'm
But
in, I find it quite curious
I find it quite
that
curious
there's absolutely there's zero evidence for young Earth creationism in the field that I'm in, and Danny Faulkner admits such. I find it curious.
You say the same thing
that when I
about
read
genetics
Jason
and
Lyle's
biology, and I've already
PhD on
demolished you
supergranulation
that.
and
So now you're
sunspots,
trying to go to the
it contradicts the young Earth creationist paradigm.
No.
I find it curious that when I come out of my field and then when I see the stuff that you're presenting and all these slides that you've compiled together, cherry picking all the data, I can just see.
See, here's the thing: you slap it
now.
around.
Here's my final point.
But then you want to say
if I do,
no, you're the one who's passive aggressive.
Look into
I
this,
come right out and
which
tell you
will
like
obviously be something that will go outside the hours that I allocate every day with respect to what I do every day. In other words, I'll be doing, I guess, homework for the benefit of this discussion, I suppose.
I hope so, because it's
then
not good for you.
I'll make a prediction. I wouldn't be surprised if I find the same sort of cherry picking
we've been sitting here for 5
in
minutes.
the genetic studies with respect to human evolution and mitochondrial stuff and all that stuff.
So
that's what I wouldn't be surprised about, because I already have in my mind not only the biblical data knowledge. So in other words, I'm very proficient with the ancient Near Eastern data set, which is something that you don't engage with. That contradicts the young Earth creationist paradigm as well. And with this field that I'm an expert in, which is the maths, physics, astrophysics stuff, that contradicts young creationism. So the one particular field that you happen to have a special interest in, to then try and trump over me because I haven't obviously studied this particular field, to then try and suggest that all the other fields of research that I'm proficient in has no validation because of this one particular point that you have to the nth degree studied and researched, supposedly.
Okay, let's go to a field that's yours. So you said over and over again that the chromosome 2 fusion is the best, most irrefutable evidence for the claim that humans and chimpanzees are related. Now, I then imagine that you're familiar with the famous Ventura paper, the evolution of African great ape subtelomeric heterochromatin and the fusion of human chromosome number 2. So obviously you're familiar with that since you constantly repeat this argument. So have you yet found an answer to this problem that has demonstrated that?
So what makes you think? What makes you think that I read this paper?
No, but real quick, I want you to answer the question. So have you?
In what related context do you think I read this paper?
Have you figured out why there's such a huge difference in the human chromosomes and the chimpanzee and gorilla chromosomes when it comes to the satellite DNA that should be found if there really was?
Why did you totally butcher Jason Lyle's explanation of starlight? And totally ignore the fact that the recent...
I literally interviewed Jason
Not only did you butcher it, but totally ignore the fact that supernovas behind galaxies totally disrupt and destroy his argument.
No. Actually, I highly recommend you go watch.
See, I can play the same game, Standing. I can start spouting.
I'm not going to let you play dodgeball because depending on the convention you look at, that's fine. You're seeing the supernova,
and you're doing the same thing.
If you understood Jason Lyle's model, you'd understand that. But I'm not going to. I'll destroy you on.
You honestly think I don't understand his model?
I want you to explain why there is a significant lack of satellite DNA around human chromosomes where they should be there. They should be present if there really was this chromosome 2 fusion that is related, obviously, to humans and chimps, and not just a chromosome 2 fusion directly in the human line. So have you read the Ventura paper by any chance, Rob?
So what I'm going to do now is go onto ResearchGate as Semantic Scholar. Type in the evolution and see how the engagement has taken place. There we go. What's the paper again?
Okay, so Smoke.
Show me the paper.
Right here. Ventura. Okay, so as you're looking that up, Smokey, do I get my uninterrupted response now?
Zoom it in a little bit there. I want to. Well, let me just make sure. Rob, did you finish your point?
Well, I hope through Standing's tantrums like a child that I was able to get my point across.
And running. You're the one who's
so
aggressive. You're the one that
I'm absolutely not affected at all.
No, I know you're not affected, but the entire audience is laughing at you. So,
everything that I do, and the people that do see what I do,
here's the thing,
and everything that I've shared online, and everything I try and very rigorously point out is, it can speak for itself.
I don't allow people to slap it around. Now, here's the thing: it's supposed to be my time. It's supposed to be my time, but what I suspect is Rob knows I'm about to.
Oh, you've been speaking a lot longer than I have, man.
So here's my uninterrupted response to that. So,
but by the way, Smokey, I can see now the toxicity that you're talking about. This sort of thing doesn't help.
Here's the thing.
Look at the church to the non-believing world outside.
He can talk smack. Okay, he can be all condescending in his little echo chambers.
Standing, I love you. You know I love you, and I got nothing but respect for you, and I know you love and respect me, and I don't try to attack you or your ideology or anything. In fact, I've even said, I've said many times, I thought you've had really good arguments. I don't agree with everything you say, and I don't think everything that comes out of Team SFT is necessarily a convincing argument, but I've given you credit when I thought something was pretty solid, and I personally, I don't really challenge you guys much on this stuff because I don't really, like I told you, I stopped studying the stuff of defense for Age of the Earth years ago. I went into studying things that would generally diffuse the atheists, not go against young earthers, So when I'm almost getting challenged from a young earther of hey, prove our arguments wrong. I haven't really dug into a lot of stuff specifically to refute, young earthers. So even some of this is kind of new to me. I can appreciate where you're coming from, Standing too, and especially with some of these polls. I had a couple questions because I'm curious about the answer that you were asking about the mutation rates. Now, I had said something a while back, and I think it was during one of your streams, and it was a question I asked, and I think you guys were talking about bird speciation. There was one time, and then there was another time you were talking about the mitochondrial DNA. In fact, I think you might have even been interviewing the doctor that actually discovered it or did a lot of work on it. I forget his name. Can you help me, Standing? Do you remember? Did you have an interview with the guy that did a lot of work on this mitochondrial stuff?
Yes. Yeah. So I did an interview with Dr. Rob Carter, who has published. Yeah.
Okay.
So he's not the only one doing it, but he has published in secular journals on mitochondrial DNA diversity. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. I just wanted to clarify. So I'm a layman when it comes to that stuff, and I'm sure there's atheists and also other young earth proponents that were in that chat were probably more versed in what was being presented to me. All I can usually do at many instances as a lay person, and maybe there's some benefit at this, but all I can do is look at the argumentation and say, is this convincing enough? And keep in mind too, it's this thing of, is it convincing enough to transition my perspective of every other field of science paradigm that I've accepted to? Like, is this evidence collectively so freaking good that I can displace it, with even the other fields of inquiry that I think lead up to the same thing? And I think that's where some of the challenge is. Now, that's just an overall scope, and I'm just speaking as a layman, and it's not even a critique. I'm just saying from my personal epistemological challenge, that's something I would consider. So just to ask you real quick about the mitochondrial DNA and the Y chromosomal stuff, which I've admitted to you before sounded really kind of convincing. Here's my question about it, which has given me a little bit of hesitation about the amount of certainty on this. Is it seems like there's kind of a bit of assumption where you're kind of well, average mutation rates. And I'm kind of okay, well, what type of assumptions are going into this average, because I think, unless I'm mistaken, there's lots of factors that can go into mutation rates.
I can answer your question. I know what you're asking.
All right, sure. Okay, no, go ahead if you know where I'm going.
Yeah. No, and that's a good question. So nobody would disagree, even evolutionary biologists, that, okay, and here's a reference here, that the observed mitochondrial DNA mutation rate is a lot faster. And a lot of times when we look at pedigree-based studies, it's 20 times higher than expected, okay? So now there are assumptions that, okay, we have what's called the substitution or the phylogenetic rate, which the evolutionists want to look to, right? They want to make assumptions. Okay, we've got this many mitochondrial DNA mutations or DNA differences separating humans and chimps, and we're going to assume that humans and chimps split from a common ancestor roughly 6 to 9 million years ago. Therefore, we're going to calculate the differences and we're going to work the mutation back that way. So they're going to come up with a much slower mutation rate. Now, we as young Earth creationists, we're not assuming, okay, because you're asking about assumptions, we don't assume that humans and chimpanzees are related and therefore had some type of hypothetical split 6 to 9 million years ago. So we assume, based on the observed mutation rate through pedigree-based studies, right? You can measure the mutation rates by looking at grandmothers, mothers, daughters, okay? And we can come up with the amount of DNA differences in the generations. And, there's a whole method to the madness. So we know the observed mutation rate is fast. So what we can do, and that's why I always go here, and this is what I debated Dr. Dan Stern-Cardinal on, because he wants to say, well, you have to assume, right? You have to assume the split, or you have to assume the geological column. You got to assume the phylogenetic rate. So I say, okay, let's just map out the DNA differences on a phylogenetic tree. And what we have here is when we build these phylogenetic trees, which is exactly what this is just a reflection for people in the audience. This is a reflection of mitochondrial DNA diversity worldwide. And what we can do is we can see how far people groups are apart from each other. Okay, and we can look at, for example, here, this is the HVR haplogroup. Okay, in Europe, I think it is the most common haplogroup in Europe. And you can see that some of the lines, okay, which consists of people, are different sizes. Okay, so what this means is some people are picking up more mutations in the same amount of time as their cousins. Okay, so that's actually a problem for the evolutionary molecular clock, because now you can't assume a constant rate from generation to generation. But we know it's fast, okay, and we know when we look at mitochondrial DNA diversity worldwide, there's only roughly 20 to 25 mutations separating any two people. What that means, Smokey, is we're looking at low genetic variation in mitochondrial DNA. So without any assumptions now, let's compare the evolution and the creation models. Okay, so we have a fast mutation rate with low variation. Okay, if deep time evolution was true and you want to go back even 200,000 years ago, okay, to say the out of Africa event, where the evolutionists would agree is their mitochondrial Eve and Y chromosome atom. Okay, we have a fast mutation rate which means we're picking up more mutations over time. There should be higher levels of genetic diversity. There should be a lot more.
Right.
DNA
No,
diversity
actually,
in this
thank you.
graph.
Thank you for saying that, because that's kind of where I was going, is that here's the thing. I've heard you say it where it's like, we track this back and we get like 6,000 years exactly or something.
No, not exactly. No. There's a window.
Okay.
I guess
that's where I'm going. What is the window? Yeah, I guess that's where I was going with it. What is the window?
Yeah. Some pedigree, but I've got an entire book that Ramad and I wrote, and it goes through most of the pedigree-based mutation rate studies that have ever come out, starting with the Parsons, going up to the Gibbons analysis of the Parsons paper.
So a quick clarifying question. Do you literally believe that just by these calculations alone, you can go back to a de novo creation of Adam and Eve?
I believe that we can go. Yeah, well, right here we see a starburst pattern where it's explosive growth from a center point. So yeah, we would say it's explosive growth from a de novo creation, which if it's a mitochondrial
and the de novo creation, but how then do you fudge that with the biblical data when the biblical data doesn't say Adam and Eve came from a de novo creation?
Well, here's the thing. We can read through the historical grammatical approach, we can read scripture, and we can clearly see that there's no evidence that we've got man and woman related to chimpanzees. We have Jesus who says that the beginning of creation, he made them male and female. Now, I understand your argument. So what we're going to do then is test the data to the young earth creation interpretation or the theistic evolutionist interpretation. Now you have a problem because you want to say that humans are related to chimpanzees. You want to hold to the out of Africa theory roughly 200,000 years ago, or maybe 70,000 years ago with this.
Yeah, but that's what the Genesis text says.
The data. If you don't want to hold to the biblical interpretation that says God created de novo Adam and Eve, okay, man and woman, then you're going to have a problem because this is only a reflection of a few hundred generations, which takes us back roughly 6,000 years ago to Eve. Now, I am curious with what Smokey was saying. Smokey, you appeared to be getting somewhere.
It's actually kind of, I had a thought, and bear with me, try to entertain me for a second. So, and I'm almost wondering if the idea, and I think this even fits what the
just quickly, Will Kincaid's comment, that's precisely my question. I love younger creation. This is what he says. I love young creationist folks. Begin at your conclusion and work backwards to retcon data into fitting your worldview. Congrats, dudes. That's exactly my point.
Well, but here's the thing. Even with the secular scientists, they're having a problem with this fast mutation rate. They're doing all these different types of calibrations. They're hoping that most mutations are lost over time, which today, with 7 billion people, most new mutations will be lost.
But can you demonstrate then that is also a perfect fit with the biblical data in light of the ancient Near Eastern data and how to understand the text, which is, at the end of the day, an ancient Near Eastern document?
Yeah, this is right here is perfectly consistent with the biblical-based data, because if we start from the position that says Adam and Eve were created de novo, let's say 6,000 years ago.
But that's not what the data says in the Bible.
I just want to finish my thought because some of this is technical. We would then predict low genetic variation in the mitochondrial DNA if we're looking at Eve, de novo Eve, and that's exactly what we find. We find one mitochondrial DNA line, we find explosive growth from a center point, and we find that the mutation rate is fast with low genetic variation. That's exactly what we would expect. I have no reason to adopt your A&E interpretation since you can't even explain the scientific data in light of your A&E interpretation. And if you think you can, then tell me how you can explain a fast mutation rate with low genetic variation.
Well, what happens?
Answer the question, please. And I won't interrupt. How do you explain, the scientific data in light of your position that says humans and chimpanzees are related?
I don't have enough working knowledge to elaborate or critique this particular data point because I haven't looked into it.
You're not answering mine.
But I'm already based on the knowledge I already have with respect to the interpretation of the text and the actual the underlying Hebrew and the underlying loan words from the other ancient Near Eastern.
I don't want you dodging. But me and Smokey are talking.
The Adam and Eve story. There is no such thing as a single pair.
I don't want you
6,000 years ago, according to not just the ancient Near Eastern account, but also the biblical account.
Smokey, this is sorry because Smokey.
All right.
That's just
Yeah,
not what we get from the Bible.
Smokey's actually trying to engage the scientific
So what
data.
what you technically what you're doing is eisegesis with this weird
Smokey, go
retcon
ahead.
science.
well,
that is
Smokey was making some points here.
let's if I could, Rob, just so I want to clarify a couple things. I actually thought of something kind of interesting. There was a point in time in the biblical narrative where it was basically commanded that incest was going to be wrong, like from that point forward, right? Like for some reason, like I guess humankind was genetically diverse enough where it wasn't an issue. Like cousins married each other and, stuff like that was probably kind of a normative, thing,
Right.
that was happening back then. And I actually kind of appreciated Standing's argument even better than some of the things I saw on Reasons, reasons.org or Reasons to Believe, in that the idea of how Neanderthals could come from us instead of us coming from Neanderthals. And Standing points out how they have the appearance of inbreeding, like they're isolated groups or families that then suffered, through a lot of massive, quick mutation and duplication, and they take on these traits that show that they're like very quickly mutated and deteriorated. And generally, you presented the idea that that was done from inbreeding. I actually thought that was a really interesting and compelling argument, and even kind of pushed me, more to a different consideration than what I had thought before. But on that note, I find it kind of interesting because I look at it and I guess I'm having an issue with this appeal to almost an assumptive uniformitarianism in this calculation, where it could be something of like, instead of there being like the consistent expectation of the mutation and the drift, it's more of an exponential decline, which is why so there's a point in the biblical narrative where it's okay for them to marry their family members, and
Right.
maybe at some point in some of these isolated pockets, well, they just took that to an extreme. They never really ventured out, and so they cascaded in mutation errors very, very quickly. Now we also know that we have Neanderthal DNA inside many of us, which means there was Neanderthal interbreeding with humans, or that's what the evidence tends to suggest. So this could show that maybe there was a time where you have, again, this heavily mutated group that's now intermingling again with a more genetically sound, genetically diverse group. And now here's a whole different set of variables to consider for this mutation clock, where to put it this way, like you could have a group of people who went through, whether it was environmental pressures or maybe inbreeding or whatever, they went through a whole lot of mutations quickly, and they stacked them up really, really fast. So it would look like, even if you applied a standard model, they would be older than they actually were because they stacked them up very, very quickly. And then you have that interbreed.
Well, let me ask you a clarifying question, though,
sure,
because you are making a lot of good points, and I agree with you, because this is exactly what I said to Dr. Dan Stern-Cardinal in my debate with him on Neanderthals, is the fact that the humans today, we are all about 99.999% similar, low genetic diversity. It turns out Neanderthals they're about 99.7% similar to us. So the argument from the evolutionists is, how do we account for those differences? Now, as you're pointing out beautifully, brother, is when you have small inbred populations and they're inbreeding for generations after generations, especially in the type of glacial ecosystem that Neanderthals are believed to live in.
Isolated pockets of groups, you wouldn't expect them doing lots of far travel or spreading out of areas where they were set up probably in their tribes. I'd almost expect them
Well, even here from a secular source, inbred Neanderthals left humans a genetic burden.
Right.
And the data that the evolutionists would agree with is that they were around 40% less fit than us today. So here's the thing. You have
That's
a small,
huge.
isolated people group, like you said, Smokey. What that means is, so what happens with inbreeding is it reveals the hidden reservoir of genetic mistakes. So if you got genetic mistakes, okay, in your genome, hidden in recessive form, they're going to come to the forefront. They're going to be manifested in inbred populations. So now you're going to have rapid fixation of new mutations, like you said. So now we have an even faster molecular clock in a way, because we have mutations being manifested rapidly, and because we have genetic drift and founder effects and things like this, then we have, let's say with the Neanderthal populations, we have new genetic variants popping up and being fixated, and which means they are going to be genetically different than us today. But if we were to just sequence the Neanderthal genome and assume some uniform molecular clock, you're right, we'd be wrong, because in the case of the Neanderthals, and I think other hominids like Floresiensis, Naledi, Erectus, so on and so forth, we would have rapid fixation of mutation. But here's the thing, Smokey, the norm is a fast mutation rate. What we have in these inbred populations of hominids is an even faster mutation rate than the norm.
Oh yeah,
so
no,
it help evolution.
Just to clarify too, that was actually my point, is because, well, let's say for instance, okay, so if the degeneracy, it wasn't like static, like say it was instead of static, saying it's like exponential. So like when you have, like, take for instance like Adam and Eve first created humans, perfect pristine genome, no errors in it whatsoever, starting
which is a wild assumption, mind you.
There's
no evidence for that.
Well, that's fine, but
no evidence for what?
He's saying I guess the immediate creation of man. He's saying
yes, there is, because I once again, I don't want Rob to slap and run. He's really good at that. So he's actually an expert. So when I first came in, I pointed out but and the audience sees it. That's fine.
Me, an expert?
Well,
I don't claim to be.
Well, you're an expert at slapping and running, so
I'm definitely an expert in maintaining rigors with peer
review. You're all the way
review.
in Australia, right? Okay, so just a second.
Yeah, how do the kangaroos hop all the way to the Middle East?
I know you're excited, but here, just a second, because I'm about to dismantle you again. So
I'm not excited.
When I first came in, I asked you about the human.
I'm having a beer.
Problem. Oh, you're having a beer, an alcoholic beer?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're just a shining light to the Christians in the chat. So anyway, what's good is you're giving them another thing to laugh at you for. So, okay, so
Jesus made some very good wine.
I know you're excited. Okay, here, just a second. So when I first came in here, I presented
calm down,
the NIH.
You don't need to act so condescending, Stanley. Honestly.
Okay, you're the one who's passive aggressive. I'm just telling you like it is. I'm not passive aggressive. Okay, you're passive aggressive. You also like to slap and run. And when people slap and run, it's for one reason. It's because they can't actually address the arguments and the data. So when I first came in, I demonstrated that the mutation accumulation problem puts shelf lives on genomes, and even evolutionary population geneticists acknowledge this. So the human mutation rate is, and Rob, since you're up to date on all this, I'm sure you know. Do you know what the human mutation rate is roughly right now, Rob?
Nope.
That's okay. So it's about 100 new mutations per person per generation. Okay. So given the low genetic diversity that we actually have in humans today, we take this point of most accumulating genetic load back to a point of least accumulating genetic load. And guess what? That would be a point of genomes without any mutations. And if there's no mutations, all we have is what? Created heterozygosity, which is actually the hypothesis that Dr. Nathaniel Jensen puts forth and has laid out a very testable model, which I asked you to name 1 to 3 predictions, which you couldn't, and that's fine. I don't know why you uploaded that 4.5-hour debate where he went over about 10 of them. You obviously weren't paying attention, and that's fine. Maybe you're an expert in that too. Okay, so yeah, that is evidence for the de novo creation of man and woman, and they would have been created without mutations, because logically, if we are accumulating 100 new mutations per person per generation today, and you go back roughly 6,000 years, well, there would be less of a genetic burden. There would also be no inbreeding problem, because there'd be no genetic mistakes to be manifested to lead to disease. the biblical-based model actually fits perfectly with the data, as we're demonstrating here tonight. Anyways, go ahead, Smokey.
So in regards to, just a quick question, Smokey, since you brought up the Neanderthal connection. So I interviewed Jeffrey Rose, an anthropologist who works in the Persian Gulf. He gave a very interesting proposition. He said, look, like I asked him about the, is there any connections? And he spoke about how they were doing virtual endocasts of human brains.
I think that was Naledi too. Homo naledi. Very human-like brain.
Well, his point was that the brain, when you're talking about babies, so they go from elongated to more globular. When you mature from infancy, and so he basically said, look, with respect to Neanderthal endocasts, their brains didn't undergo any form of elongation to globular, brain shape changes and so on. And so then this is then what basically he basically said, yeah, this humans and Neanderthals are distinct species just based on that alone.
Well, actually, I just watched a lecture because I'm writing a book. So it's a lecture from a few months ago, actually, a secular-based lecture, and even he was admitting that Neanderthals are probably the same species as humans. Right here, where Neanderthals a separate species. This is, I believe, from Smithsonian, so not a young Earth creationist source by any means. So our genes suggest that modern humans interbred with Neanderthals, and that's led some anthropologists to claim Homo neanderthalensis should be considered a subspecies of Homo sapiens rather than a separate species or a sister species. So yeah, you're just out of date, unfortunately, on that, Rob. And
yeah, but then how do you explain the comment that he made to me specifically about the Neanderthal hominid?
The fact that they had different morphology and different shape to
not
their
just
skull,
that, but just the baby, like the brain development and the skull.
But what about
there is no such thing as elongation to a globular shape, which is a telltale sign that they're a distinct species.
Well, it's not a telltale sign that they're a distinct species. They were the most inbred people group on the planet. They literally, their rungs of homozygosity were shocking and are shocking. That's why paper after paper is coming out telling us that Neanderthals were the same species or a subspecies of Homo sapiens, but because of the environmental conditions, which we know. Are you familiar with the research in epigenetics, that extra layer of complicated information?
Again, this is...
And well, I'm just trying to explain to you. I'm giving you your answer.
Notice,
this epigenetics is actually showing
not
that you can
my
have
field of research.
And that's fine.
And even though it's not my field of research, I'm sort of bringing up, recollecting from memory, discussions with anthropologists themselves. For example, Jeffrey Rose is a well-respected Middle Eastern anthropologist. Where the one thing the takeaway thing that I took from him was specifically brain shape and brain organization.
Yeah, epigenetics can result in that in just a couple generations, especially coupled with significant inbreeding, an ecoglacial system. I've got quotes and sources from other anthropologists as well that claim Homo neanderthalensis should be considered a subspecies rather than a separate species. And I think that's true. The differences are very minute, and whatever differences are there can be explained through epigenetics.
Yeah, but the one point I took away from his point was the craniofacial growth.
And that can be explained given their conditions. That's fine. You got so right here from Smithsonian. Look at this. They had adaptation to living in cold environments. Okay, but their brains were just as large as ours and often larger, proportional to their brawnier bodies. So we understand that the environmental conditions that they were subject to, for one, you'd have less vitamin D, which means there's a.
So you're suggesting Neanderthals are basically human. So you're saying Neanderthals are a subspecies of human.
No, they're the same species as human, but they are an inbred people group who, because of inbreeding, manifested a ton of new mutations, deleterious mutations that led to accelerated genetic degeneration. On top of that, you have these adaptations based on the cold environments that they lived in, which means you're looking at epigenetic modification, which in a few generations, and I've got papers to demonstrate that here too, if you'd like to see it, epigenetics can result in those types of anatomical or morphological adaptations and modifications in just a few generations. Yeah, Neanderthals are completely human. They're an inbred people group. And that's what the secular literature tells us as well. 40% less reproductively fit was that paper I was showing. Are you saying that they're not human? Are you trying to say they're pre-human? I mean, they buried their dead. They're into cosmetics. They had purposeful navigation. Are you saying they're pre-human, not made in the image of God, Rob?
No, I don't think they're human at all.
What in the world? Well, they're 99.7% similar to humans. Look at this. They died for shellfish. They're into music, made complex tools, art and decoration. They're into dental hygiene, used medicine, buried their dead.
In fact, okay. So then why didn't Fazal Rana in his 20? So I've just brought up.
Yeah, he's wrong. Fazal Rana is wrong.
I've just opened his 10-year update. I've just opened his 10-year update on who was Adam. And he says here, with respect to brain organization, he says, in 2013, Oxford University researchers published a report on differences between Neanderthal and human brain organization. Neanderthals possessed nearly the same brain size as humans, so see chapter 12.
And they have the same FOXP2 gene as us too.
Well,
FOXP2 gene is?
Well, yeah, I'm familiar with that because
what's it involved in? The FOXP2 gene. What's it involved in?
Speech.
Exactly. So they have the same FOXP2 gene as us. They had the same type of speech as us, but they were a highly inbred people group. So they're not going to be exactly the same as us. They're going to be more degenerate in many ways. Probably. Now, Heidelbergensis is probably the early Neanderthal. The Neanderthal we're looking at now.
Well, I haven't finished reading what he says here. So this 2013 study he's citing is from Elund, Pierce, Christinger, and Dunbar. New insights into differences in brain organization between Neanderthals and anatomically modern humans. Proceedings of the Royal Society, a 2013 paper. So then he says...
Yeah, 2013 is out of date, though. All this data about how inbred they were, 40% less fit, the fact that Rob, you realize we have their genes, right? Like we literally, if you get a DNA test, they can tell you what percent Neanderthal you are. That means we mated with them. I mean, were our population.
Yeah, but the amount that's in us is very small at the same time. It's not.
Of course, they've been extinct for thousands of years.
It's funny. There's actually probably a little bit of a part of this that I think might even appeal to Rob's model that he typically kind of holds, because he does believe in the out of Africa idea and migration out of Africa. And the interesting thing is African people don't have any Neanderthal DNA. Only the European people do. Only the place where the people migrated to.
Yeah, Smokey. Jeff Rose actually brought that up, and he said that he thinks the Neanderthal. So don't forget, he's coming at this without any theological. Like, for example, he doesn't have the Genesis 6:1-4 in mind, right? So he proposes, because he's Jewish as well, so he grew up with reading the Torah. He was always fascinated with the Nephilim, and he proposes that the Nephilim are nothing but a type of Neanderthal group that
let's not get into the Neanderthals.
Pocketed out.
I want to stay on subject.
And they're not connected to what you just said, the out of Africa sort of model.
Listen, Neanderthals are human in every way, shape, and form. Okay, anybody who says they're not human is just out of date with the literature. This is a paper from 2021, literally just came out. I'm not sure if you guys have read it. Fascinating paper, Origins of Modern Human Ancestry. Here we argue that no specific point in time can currently be identified at which modern human ancestry was confined to a limited birthplace. Okay, there's data that's suggesting the out of Africa theory is not true, and that patterns of the first appearance of anatomical or behavioral traits that are used to define Homo sapiens are consistent with a range of evolutionary history. So what we're finding
isn't it interesting that just said consistent with the range of evolutionary histories?
Well, of course, when you're starting these secular
The
papers,
so-called
do you think they're young Earth
latest paper
creationists?
is not a young Earth creationist paper. How
No,
ironic.
it's challenging. It's challenging the human origin story of humans coming out of Africa. That's the point. Is everybody likes to
Okay,
talk
I'm going to
about
open this
the out of
paper.
Africa
What's
theory.
the author's name? Oh, Chris Stinger. Okay, the same guy that Fuzz is mentioning over here.
Yeah, exactly. So here's the thing. There are challenges right now. For example, here's a quote on the origin of species. Contrary to many believe, neither the genetic or fossil record have so far revealed a defined time and place for the origin of our species. Okay. Now, when we actually combine what the secular data is saying with the young Earth creation research from people like Dr. Carter, Dr. Nathaniel Jensen, and these mitochondrial and Y chromosome trees, phylogenetic trees, you can actually see that it's more consistent with an out of Babel story and model as compared to the out of Africa story. Because if the out of Africa story,
An out of
true,
Babel story.
if the out of course, humans came from Babel, not Africa.
Where's Babel located?
The Middle East. And the Middle East is actually the center of genetic diversity, so that makes sense. And that's why
where in the Middle East?
It's not in Africa. I don't,
the Middle East does include Africa, mind you. You have the Nile Delta. That's the Middle East.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is your position that roughly 700 to 200,000 years ago was. I don't know. Are you saying that you're in agreement that the out of Africa theory has some major problems? I don't understand what you're.
No, I've always held to the out of Africa model.
Yeah, and I'm showing you that there's some huge problems with it.
And I'm suggesting that Genesis 2 then shows man migrating into the Persian Gulf region, which is Jeffrey Rose's point as well, based on his studies with respect to migration patterns that he's researched.
So okay, but
that's if you go along with the 200,000 year dating for the out of Africa model, humans go into the Persian Gulf oasis around 70,000 years, and then the flood happens around 13,000 years.
I understand. But here's the thing. You don't have 200,000 years because here we only have a few thousand years max for mitochondrial DNA and the Y chromosome. And what's worse is I've been dying to ask you this question. Here's a secular paper. The Y chromosome. When it comes to the Y chromosome between the humans and chimpanzees, if I can find it here we go. This is a great paper. I debated Dr. Ron Garrett on this. Chimpanzee and human Y chromosomes are remarkably divergent in structure and gene content. So Rob, what we have here is every single human male Y chromosome, my Y chromosome, your Y chromosome, Smokey's Y chromosome, nearly identical. The same Y chromosome, essentially 99.99% similar, which demonstrates that we obviously all share a common Y chromosomal ancestor, okay, since we have the same Y chromosome with a few mutations. But when they sequenced the chimpanzee Y chromosome, they discovered that when you, and I got some excerpts from the paper, highly recommend it, when you consider overall size differences, gene content, and architecture, the chimpanzee Y chromosome is less than 35%. 35% dissimilar. This is coming from secular literature to the human Y chromosome. So how in the world, Rob, do you explain the fact that the human or the chimpanzee Y chromosome is less than 35% dissimilar to the human Y chromosome? Mind you, every human male Y chromosome is 99.99% similar. Have you looked into that? What's your response? I'm just curious.
Well, I've just, as you're speaking, just a very quick clarifying question. That particular paper you brought up by Anders Bergstrom and Chris Stringer, Origins of Modern Human Ancestry, published online 10 February. We're able to access the whole paper? Or did you just access the abstract?
It was sent by Dr. Rob Carter. He did a video on it, so he's my source for that one. Yeah, he's the one I had on the channel. But
you have the paper to that. Were you able to gain access to the paper?
I think I have it. I don't have it here in a slide form now. But when it first did come out, yeah, we all read it in our group. Me, John Maddox, Ron Matt, yeah. But it's not easily accessible. No, why? What's the conclusion of the paper that you think?
Well, I'm sharing my screen because obviously this is the first time I'm opening the paper.
Mm-hmm.
So I've just accessed it through my academic institute. The only way you can access it is if you actually have if you're registered with your university and you can actually access these papers.
Well, we have something through Otangelo, who thankfully pretty much gives us access to.
So, I mean, I'm just opening this for the first time. So here's the abstract.
Right.
And technically this is illegal to do, but I don't think people will check on Smokey's stream.
Should I minimize
presenting the paper free?
Oh yeah, that's right. Because I'm gonna. I do things like that.
I mean, just by scrolling through this, he's saying things like, "Here we go, Northeast Africa. This is what I hold to. There's a spreading out. Modern human-like remains of material culture, genetic ancestry consistent with deriving from the major worldwide dispersal less than 60,000 years." So, I mean, I'm in Australia, so that's very consistent. I maintain that 65,000 year range for the Aborigines. You know, what in here? Like, look at this then chart. This is the first time I'm opening this chart. Modern human origins and diversification in Africa in the past 300,000 years. This is according to the paper you just cited.
I've already shown you that they calibrate the dates in these papers. You don't have 300,000 years.
So, but this is the latest paper. Why isn't this paper engaging with this?
Calibrate the data. They're starting from the evolution.
But why aren't they engaging with your observations that you've been making?
Have you read the Parsons paper and the Ann Gibbons?
But this is the 2021 paper.
Yeah, and they're still dealing with the problems of mutation rates.
So why cite this paper?
Because
if this hasn't dealt with the arguments that you've been making.
Because it shows that there's no reliable data currently to say for sure that we have come out of Africa, as the evolutionists want to say, roughly 70 to 200,000 years ago. As in, that's a 2021 paper where they're coming up with various models to try and explain the data and explain where humans originated from. Was it Africa? Was it? I mean, every single civilization today, I mean, even China right now has their own theories as to where humans have originated from. Point is, the out of Africa theory is not as solid. Here's the quote. I had to find it. So who made this quote? From the Francis Crick Institute, Pontus Skoglund. Contrary to what many believe, neither the genetic or fossil record have so far revealed a defined time and place for the origin of our species. That's the whole point, is the out of Africa theory is not as strong as some people want to say. And based on the Y chromosome and mitochondrial DNA phylogenetic trees based on diversity worldwide, you don't have a few 100,000 years. You got a few thousand years max. And Rob, I challenge you, after this, I understand it's okay if you don't have the data and the answers. Now go study it, and study. I've debated numerous PhDs on this. Take 3 months, study it day and night, and then we'll debate it. I'm telling you, there's no answers. It's still up in the air.
So
calibrating data left and right.
So I'm going to basically impress the biological anthropological field. And you know, any colleagues in that particular department.
Yeah, you'll make Swami
by taking 3 months out of my time to debate you on this particular topic.
Well, you don't. I'm just saying. You keep saying, "Well, this paper says 300,000 years." I'm trying to show you.
So what I did was I went into my academic institute that I'm registered to, which, not to be pompous, but I doubt you have access to something like a academic library through an institute. So if you were studying a degree with respect to the sciences, you'd be able to access this paper. I've accessed the paper, brought it up publicly for everyone to see.
No, we can access all.
And lo and behold, he's demonstrating here is there's a granulation with respect to, like, if you go down to this particular page, he's saying, look, there you have an in Africa replacement that's apparently rejected.
Yeah, this is their model.
Yeah, so he's reviewing the model.
The model is 100%. You come up with a hypothesis.
So he's going through all the so-called Africa models with respect to the South Africa, East Africa.
And they fail. I've already shown you, and you admitted you don't have an answer. So I don't know why you keep digging yourself in a hole. If you think that their model,
but he says here most of which cannot be rejected using the current data.
Yeah, which models can't be rejected?
He's saying African ancestry origins can be conceptualized as range of models, most of which cannot be rejected using the current data.
By the way, Standing, just so you know, Kenny says he can provide access to papers for you. He has access to Liberty and Regent Libraries. So if you want to access things, let him know. He's apparently offering for you.
I appreciate it. Well, I just want to know an answer to the question that I showed you. I was screen sharing. If all this is true and these models are stronger than our models, then how do you explain the less than 35% dissimilarity between human Y chromosomes and chimpanzee Y chromosomes? Because that destroys all the assumptions made in papers like this when you get into the data sections. How do you explain that?
I've just stumbled across this. How do you explain this then? He goes, present-day diversity levels reflect not only loss of diversity due to population bottlenecks, but also increased diversity due to admixture. As exemplified by how a pattern of greater diversity in Europe compared to East Asia today was not present in ancient populations.
I write about that all in my books.
So furthermore, diversity levels of major sub-Saharan populations are all within around 10% of each other without strong geographical trends.
You asked me to explain it. I'll explain it. So as I was explaining earlier, humans, when they first sequenced the human genome, they discovered that humans have incredibly low genetic diversity. We're all 99.99% similar. Now, this was contradictory to the evolutionary model. Obviously, if you're evolving for millions of years, a mutation, by definition, adds diversity because it's adding something that was not previously there. This is understood. So if you have Australopithecines evolving for millions of years into Homo habilis into Erectus, and eventually Erectus into humans, we would expect what? High levels of genetic diversity in humans, but no, we have low levels. So what they did is resorted to what's called a post hoc ad hoc rescue device. And they said, well, roughly 70,000 years ago, maybe 200,000 years ago, there was this massive near extinction event in Africa that reduced the human population to between 2 and 10,000. And that way levels of heterozygosity.
What about the Toba eruption then?
Yeah, the Toba eruption. What's funny is I debated Gutsy Gibbon, and she held to the Toba eruption, and then I sent her a bunch of stuff or argued that no, that's actually contradictory. She's not even holding to the Toba extinction anymore.
And the Younger Dryas actually soon after that?
Which one do you hold to that would have been this massive near?
It's a compilation of a lot of things.
Yeah.
The Toba was part of it. Then the Younger Dryas was basically the flood.
Yeah, but the Toba extinction is very, very well disputed. Even among evolutionary biologists that I've debated, they said, yeah, no, you're right. The Toba extinction doesn't work. So here's the thing. This was not predicted, though. This was a patch. This was a Band-Aid. Oh, no. How do we explain the low genetic diversity? Well, from our model, God creates Adam and Eve 6,000 years ago. Now there's only been about 6,000 years of history. So that automatically restricts genetic diversity. It's exactly what we predict. But the evolutionary model predicts high levels of genetic diversity. Oops, there's low levels of genetic diversity. Maybe there is some, bottleneck 70 to 200,000 years ago that reduced the human population to between 2 and 10,000. Okay, I'll give you it, Rob. Let's say that is true. Well, you then need hundreds of generations, thousands of years to reduce levels of heterozygosity. Well, what happens with inbreeding? Well, inbreeding reveals the hidden reservoir of genetic mistakes. What that would have done to that population of 2 to 10,000 human beings at the time is it would have led to rapid accumulation of new mutations, which would have led to disease and genetic degeneration. But we're supposed to expect that this highly inbred population of humans suddenly spread out in all parts of the world, seizing dominion over the planet, eventually inventing the space shuttle? No, that doesn't even work. Explain that. This highly inbred population of 2 to 10,000 managed to spread out in all parts of the world, seizing dominion over the planet. I mean, do you know what inbreeding does? Well, how do you fit that in your model? Go ahead.
Yeah, inbreeding is deleterious.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically, I don't believe that Eve came from Adam's side.
No, I'm talking about your population.
And I don't believe that Adam and Eve's children were inbreeding.
Rob, you're dodging. I'm asking about your population bottleneck of 2 to 10,000, where the population was reduced to 2 to 10,000 to explain.
No. But that I don't hold to that population stat, like it went down to that size population, because I know Joshua Somodos has basically engaged with Dennis Venemer on precisely that point.
Yeah, but how do you explain the low levels of genetic diversity in humans today? 99.99% similar.
again, I'm not proficient in those details. By the way, Smokey, I want
Yeah, but Rob,
read something out.
Rob,
bring
that's
my
why.
screen back
Obviously,
up.
you don't understand your own out of Africa theory. That's why they look to the population bottleneck to explain the low levels of genetic diversity. Now you're saying, well, I don't believe in that. And then I say, well, how do you explain the low levels of genetic diversity? And then you say, well, I'm not up to date on the data. I don't have an answer. You need the population bottleneck to explain the low levels.
Smokey,
of
where's my
diversity.
screen?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was.
Well,
yeah, this.
Smokey. So, Smokey, how do you explain the
No. 1 second. 1 second standing. This bit here, my eyes caught this. This is precisely what I do hold to. So this particular paragraph. So he says here, according to him, again, I'm just reading this fresh. I haven't even read this paper.
Yeah, that's fine.
So more recent studies that allow for gene flow have suggested that strands of ancestry that are at least as divergent as South African ancestry are present in Western as well as Central and Eastern Africa.
Right.
More importantly, as people are likely to have moved from where their ancestors lived more than 200,000 years, there is no strong expectation that the geographical location of the people carrying the most divergent ancestry today would correspond to a point of origin. Similarly, although the mitochondrial Eve, a hypothetical female ancestor of everyone alive today, will have existed and probably lived about 200,000 years. So, again, I just find it interesting that he's saying this.
Yeah, but
the
diversity is too low. It's impossible.
He then says the location where she or her Y-chrome atom counterpart lived is not necessarily expected to be the birthplace of all human ancestry.
Of course, yeah. Because the evolutionary model doesn't say there was a de novo origin of male and female. They would say populations evolve over time. So that Y chromosomal ancestor and the mitochondrial DNA ancestor would have been part of a population. But due to coalescence, the Fuzz Rana would agree. That
so here's something so ironic. So when he says in many other parts of the genome, the most divergent branch will be found elsewhere in Africa or possibly sometimes outside of Africa.
Oh yeah.
Then he's like, look,
Africans
for these
have higher
reasons.
diversity than
So notice, so Smokey, here's the critical thinking coming to mind. This is again the Dunning-Kruger at work. So he goes.
Okay, so you're going to slap and run.
For these reasons,
I've written books on this. I know everything you're talking about. You're just saying things. I'm refuting.
Look, no. I'm reading the paper you've literally just cited as coming out in February of this year. So he goes, for these reasons, current genomes simply do not contain enough information on where our early ancestors lived geographically. So if all of this there's not enough information with respect to the genome, why then did you go into that massive tirade on...
Because I'm trying to say...
As if you know practically exactly how the...
It doesn't work.
How our ancestry works, where we come from, how old it is.
Yeah, but I've already shown you an hour of genetic data that refutes your position. So how do you explain the fact that... I'm not even going to ask
what do you mean? How do you mean how I explain? I'm just reading from a paper that's... This paragraph has contradicted practically this 2-3 hours of...
No, it doesn't.
Discussion that
it confirms
yes, it does.
What I'm saying. It says for these reasons, current genomes simply do not contain enough information on where our early ancestors lived geographically.
But you said that comes from the Middle East.
The out of Africa theory is not as strong as all the evolutionists want to say it is. There's a lot of patches. There's a lot of problems. The near extinction event apparently that occurred.
So how can you definitely say it's in the Middle East?
For many reasons.
Many reasons that this particular author doesn't know.
No. So for example.
So then what? I mean, the very next point, he's like, look, a possible late Pleistocene expansion across Africa.
I've already shown you 2 mitochondrial DNA. I showed you 1 mitochondrial DNA phylogeny and 1 Y chromosomal DNA phylogeny that is consistent with a Y chromosomal ancestor and a mitochondrial DNA ancestor just a few thousand years ago, based on DNA diversity, based on DNA differences, based on the mutation rates. I've shown you that there's massive problems with the out of Africa model. I've shown you that the chimpanzee Y chromosome and the human Y chromosome is less than 35% dissimilar. How do you explain that? How do you explain the massive divergence in chimpanzee and human Y chromosome? How do you explain that? According to your model, less than 35% dissimilar. How do you explain that?
Yeah, I'll have to look into that.
Okay, that's fine. I'm just trying to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Smokey.
No, I thought on that. I was curious. So you were saying like humans, like all humans, like they're measured and their Y chromosome is like super like mega similar, like 99.9% or something like that.
Yeah, I've
And
actually got a paper here that
Right.
I can pull up. And show you.
And then there's no, that's fine. I'm not even arguing that. And then it's different to chimpanzees by what'd you say, like 35% or something like
yeah,
that? Or,
yeah, it's
okay.
it's
Right, but like
less than 35%.
So like chimpanzees compared to each other would have very low or very high Y chromosomal differences with each other.
Good question. No, they wouldn't be as low as humans because we have low genetic variation. Right.
And they have higher genetic variation.
Higher, but not anything close to less than 35% as we see with humans and chimpanzees.
Well, and I guess we'll see, because like the so our argument from a creationist model is that even though chimps are like 97 something percent similar, that little, well, first of all, that little percentage difference is all based upon coding DNA comparison. It has nothing to do with non-coding sections, which haven't really been factored in completely.
Well, yeah,
so finish your point. No, finish your point, and then I'll read this, and then I'll have to head off.
Okay. I just want to say real quick, Smokey, the reason why the Y chromosome is such a great DNA compartment to look at in terms of comparisons is because it's referred to as non-recombining DNA. So, for example, our nuclear DNA, right, experiences what's called recombination, right? Me and my wife, we would transmit half of our DNA to the kids, and you'd have recombination where the nuclear genomes would scramble. You get new variants. Right. The Y chromosome, though, it's only passed down from on the male side. Right. You got your Y chromosome from your dad. Right. So it's non-recombining DNA, which means it's more stable. It's easier to track ancestry. Right. So if it's more stable, then in a way it should be more similar. But yet what we found is it's extremely dissimilar between humans and chimps. Now, no, all humans nearly identical, but humans and chimps, which isn't a problem for me because I don't believe humans and chimps are related anyway. So it makes sense. Okay, less than 35% dissimilar. Yeah, that's what I would have expected.
Well, and that was my, and of course, I already agree with you on that, but I was just trying to steel man Rob's side of like, the idea that, the common ancestor would have similar Y chromosomes, and at some point there's a divergence, there's a split. And the reason I think it, like, even a minor like difference could end up equating to like a lot over time is the idea that chimps are 90 something percent similar to us, but that little 3% difference means a lot. I mean, it means structure, intelligence, all sorts of things are massively morphologically, structurally different.
And then picture less than 35% dissimilar, though. Less than 35%. That's 70% different in the Y. That's a lot.
Oh, that's what. Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Okay, I see. That's the other side. Okay. Well, anyway, go ahead, Rob, if you want to say, and then you kind of wanted to bow out.
Well, I'm just. This is the sort of the last, statement that will be here. And by the way, standing. I hope that you can see me opening this paper shows that I'm being transparent, that I'm not hitting and running as you claim that I'm doing.
Slapping and running.
Oh, slapping and running. Like the fact that I took the time, opened my library, searched this article, pulled it up, downloaded it. I'm going through it.
But I wish you'd read it without your incredible biases.
No, there's no. Again, those are your assumptions.
You're buying into all the assumptions.
Those are your assumptions. The fact is,
I know the assumptions that go into the author's conclusions, and the assumptions don't work.
Look,
for the several reasons.
This is not this. This is the last page. This is before the bibliographic, stuff that he's going to share after this conclusion.
Rob,
this is the ending of it. So let me. what
Rob,
I need to
They've
go.
literally
I
got
just
the
need
assumption right there.
I need to
Until the
tell
common
you.
ancestor with
I need to let you
chimpanzees,
know
I've already
about
shown
something.
you that assumption
No,
is
I'm
being
sorry.
demolished.
So he literally just
The
says,
assumption's right in there.
he
Until
concludes
the
by
common
saying,
ancestor with chimpanzees, they
he
assume
concludes
that.
by saying, in any case,
Oh,
with the
you're bad,
earliest generally accepted evidence of hominins outside of Africa at around 2 million years.
How did they get the 2 million years?
Well, the one
Are they
on
calibrating
footnote
the data with something?
166, the paper he's citing is by Ferring, earliest human occupations, dated to 1.85 to 1.78 million years. It's this particular paper. It's a 2011 paper he's citing over here. So
This
then
paper does not help the out of
then he says, outside of Africa, around 2 million years, the fossil record strongly suggests that all human ancestors before this point, until the common ancestor with chimpanzees, lived in Africa.
Yeah, it's wrong.
The very paper
wrong.
that you're saying is
Their model's been
attacking
refuted.
the out of Africa model concludes with this point.
No. Rob, you clearly missed the points. Okay, the point is,
I'm not missing the point.
Africa theory.
So I think the audience outside has seen that I've been very transparent about this, even though I have absolutely. I'm an amateur when it comes to this.
Yeah, no, and I think
research.
the audience has seen you misrepresent the young Earth creation model, because we are making testable predictions, especially in genetics and biology. Dr. John Sanford is actively working on the human genetic degeneration problem. He literally spoke at NIH. Now, I want to say I understand I came across aggressive tonight, but it just kind of irritates me when I see jabs that you throw at I would assume brothers in Christ. I know they're my brothers in Christ. But here's the thing, Rob. In my opinion, you should take a little bit more time to maybe, and I understand you're a busy guy and you can't be an expert at all fields, but, look into and study the latest predictions and the strongest models currently coming out of the young Earth creationist side. You can start with Dr. Nathaniel Jensen, Carter, Sanford, and then we can have a meaningful dialogue. But the thing is, I do find that you're a little bit condescending to young Earth creation in general. And that it's kind of a turnoff then in terms of dialoguing. Smokey and I, we talk about these things all the time and we don't even agree, but we never get overly aggressive with each other. We have a mutual respect. And I'd like to have that mutual respect with you, but it just seems, especially like if you're in a group with the atheists and no young Earth creationists there, it's kind of just like a rip on young Earth creationist fest. And I think I've at least demonstrated that there's some powerful evidence for our position, especially in biology and genetics. And I think you just need to take it a little bit more seriously and be a little less condescending to your young Earth creationist brothers and sisters.